大家好, I'm Bala from Bala's Simple Chinese School. If you are a beginner, intermediate, advanced, looking for HSK study, business Chinese, or simply want to improve your everyday communication, I'm the teacher for you. Come and join me for a free travel class at Bala's Simple Chinese School.
Hello everyone, Craig here. Welcome to another edition of the podcast, Tell Craig Your Story. Today we'll be speaking to Adrian Gomez. Now Adrian is the promoter of Middle Kingdom Wrestling, MKW in China. Now MKW held its first show in July 2015. Now Adrian is from the USA. He came to China in 2010. Now I talk all things wrestling with Adrian. And we also talk about the WWE, AEW. We talk about the independent wrestling. Now, Adrian announced the date on the podcast for the Shanghai show in June. And I'm super excited to go to this event. But before we go, please go to our website where you're at Podbean. Tell Craig Your Story at podbean.com. We have a link tree there which tells you where Tell Craig Your Story podcast is streaming. We are on all the major streaming services. Google Podcast, Apple iTunes, Spotify, to name a few. We also have VK for our Russian listeners and WeChat for our Chinese listeners at Tell Craig Your Story. We have a YouTube account there. Make sure you're subscribing to get all the latest updates. All right, here we go. This is my chat with Adrian on Tell Craig Your Story podcast. Hi Adrian, how you doing today? Or tonight for you?
Great, Craig. Thanks for having me on your show.
No worries. Thank you very much for your time. So tell us, what are you doing back at home? You've got your promotion here in China. So tell us about a bit of a review for 2023 so far.
Sure. Well, as you know, living in China during the whole zero COVID policy, it was a bit difficult to get in and out, wasn't it? As soon as the policy had lifted, the zero COVID policy, I thought it was a great time to go home and do some unfinished business, see my folks who I haven't seen since the start of the pandemic, and just to just take care of definitely some lingering things that I would normally take care of once a year when I was visiting America. But it had been about more than 3 years since I was last back home. So just staying here a bit longer, but by next month, I should be back in China.
Right. And for the promotion, I did see that you did have one recently, but it got postponed.
Right. So regarding Middle Kingdom Wrestling during the pandemic, at the start of 2020, I guess I'll just give a little bit of a brief background.
Sure, go for it.
Middle Kingdom Wrestling, we're a pro wrestling company in China. We do, sports entertainment based events, similar to what you might see like on WWE or, older than that, maybe you might be familiar with WWF or WCW, but that's what we did. We try to create our own local brand of pro wrestling, which we call like pro wrestling with Chinese characteristics. We started MKW in 2015, and then the ball just kind of got rolling there. I mean, we were able to get a lot of support, a lot of fan support, a lot of interest from media and folks like that were just supporting grassroots organization
Right.
of pro wrestling in China. I think it's something that everybody wants to see succeed. It's something that a lot of people are just, they all hope that. What I found is that it wasn't just me, who, like, I'm the one who started MKW, but what I found is that I was able to find a lot of people with the same vision, the same drive, that also wanted to make professional wrestling become like a mainstream product in China. And in the pandemic, we kind of changed our course a bit. We started running like online shows, kind of like an episodic
Oh,
show,
yeah,
kind of
right.
like an episode of like WWE Raw or Monday Nitro. So we created about 50 episodes of a show called MKW Blast Off, or in Chinese MKW Qihang. That was our strategy during the pandemic. What we found is that we thought that we could keep running that probably until maybe 2022, and then we thought, okay, then let's get back into live events with selling tickets, getting people back in. But as we saw, the zero COVID policy went on a little bit longer than we all thought.
Yeah.
And we did promote a pretty big event in Shanghai. We really had hope that by like maybe September of 2022 or maybe November of 2022, we could have this big event. Well, of course, we ended up holding it off until we could find a new date. And thankfully, we haven't announced this very publicly yet. Internally, a lot of people know, but June 6th will be our return to Shanghai, be our first major, live event with ticket sales and broadcast and all that kind of stuff. So that will be at Mao Live House.
All right.
In Shanghai.
Wow. That's a very nice venue as well. I've been there a couple of times to watch the concerts. So that's going to be really, really cool.
Yeah, we intend to invite a few. And with the border being open, and actually prior to the pandemic, we had been accustomed to importing talent. Maybe for every show we'd import some guys and girls that were not living in China. But thankfully, this is the first show where we plan to import some wrestlers. One of the wrestlers we're looking at right now is Yoshi Tatsu from Japan, who had worked with the WWE for several years. And we're also looking at a few other names that we're not ready to announce yet, but we're definitely intending to make a huge mark on June 6th in Shanghai at Mao Live House.
That's really cool because I remember I've been to the last two WWE when they come to Shanghai before the pandemic. So there is a bit of hardcore fan base here in not only Shanghai, but in China. So where are you getting your talent from?
Besides the wrestlers that we have trained like in-house, the Chinese domestic wrestlers that we have been working with, and some of them we've trained since, from their very foundation. But we also have a number of wrestlers who are actually expats that are living in China that have made China their home for several years, and that they just happened to, when they were before they came to China, they were independent wrestlers where they came from. But we happen to have a really good mix of the local Chinese wrestlers, and also a really good mix of foreign talent that are living in China as expats.
Right. And how do the Chinese fans react to it? Is it a popular sport? Do they get to see WWE or AEW? Where are you getting your fan base from?
Right. It really depends. See, if we're running a show where we're selling tickets, and we've ran a lot of shows where, it was like a traditional, I guess you could say, wrestling show setup where you got to buy tickets to get in, the video might be aired live on broadcast or maybe later in post-production. But those fans that typically buy a ticket to come and watch us live, I would describe them as being very, I guess you could say, like Western, wrestling fans. They get it. They understand. They understand the product. They understand, their part in the wrestling performance. They know their part. They know what they need to do as fans and how to enjoy themselves, whether it's, cheering on the faces or booing the heels or whatever they need to do. They get it. And then we also have also ran shows that are like public shows. So that can be like outside of a shopping mall or inside a shopping mall, or maybe some like open square. And in those places, you will attract, I guess you could say, people who are not familiar with wrestling. Maybe they've just maybe it might be beyond their age demographic, or it could be just that they've never really sat to watch it. But those folks tend to be a little bit confused in the beginning. However, for those that stick around and do continue to watch the matches, I do notice that you get to see a little bit of a transformation of the casual audience when they're like, oh, okay, you know what? I get this. That's the good guy. Oh, okay, I see. And you can see that transformation. And I do think that that's what makes wrestling great, is that really everyone has the potential to be a fan. And that's why it's kind of kept us going this whole time, because we feel that every time you get the product in front of people's eyes, the turnaround time for them going from non-fan to either a potential casual fan or a super fan can happen literally within minutes. So those are the two different kinds of audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was your decision to come to China in the first place? What drew you in? It's not every day that you decide to just wake up and go to China.
Sure. I came to China in 2010. In 2010, I was a huge fan of the TV show No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain. He's a travel host that's inspired millions of people and millions of dreamers. I would consider myself one of those dreamers. And at that time, around 2010, early 2010, he did an episode in Harbin, China, which was actually like, there's just something about that particular episode and the way he was able to present and describe China in such a place. You typically see like Shanghai, Beijing, those kind of cities. But when I saw, a place that just looked so unbelievably different that I couldn't believe existed, Harbin, and I just decided pretty much right then and there. I had just come back from a term in Guanajuato, Mexico. I was doing a university term there, and I was at my parents' house and I was watching that episode, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to just check out if there's any jobs or something. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to get there. And of course, I was able to find my way there eventually through an English teaching gig in August of 2010.
Right. So you said you were in Mexico at the time. Did you watch any of the Mexican wrestling down there, the Lucha Libre?
Yeah, wherever I go, I will make an effort to watch local wrestling. So I was there for a few months doing a university course there, and I saw a poster for like a traveling Lucha Libre Libre event, and I took some of my classmates there. I convinced them to go. I was like,
all right,
I was like, you guys have to see this. It was a few girls. It was like two girls from Ireland. I can't remember. I remember it was two girls from Ireland and an American guy. I was able to get a group. I was finally able to get a group. I'm like, let's just go. And we ended up going, and that was a lot of fun. It was, I wasn't familiar with any of the wrestlers or anything like that, but it didn't really matter. It was just like watching Lucha Libre in Mexico was just an experience in of itself.
The whole high flyers there in Mexico, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, definitely its own style.
So what was your first impression of China? For me, this is just like a totally different thing. So for you in 2010, I think they called, or maybe Shanghai, the Wild West. So for Harbin, what was your first impressions there?
2010 Harbin was definitely different than 2023 Harbin. It's interesting because I know you asked me what my first impression is, but I just really the first thing I want to say is this what the lasting impression is, where I'm like, wow, it's changed so much in those 13 years. But yes, 13 years ago when I first arrived, obviously it's not a major city, but probably the biggest impression was the population, right? Like it doesn't seem whether you're in a Shanghai or Beijing or a city like Harbin, you're always around more people than you've ever been around it.
Yes.
Another very interesting component of landing in China for the first time had to be one thing that I just couldn't get over, and unfortunately I did try to take care of that, and that's the language. I started to realize that all the Chinese language that I listened to in like films and TV shows, it's nothing like what it is in real life, or at least that kind of accent, the Dongbei accent.
Yes.
And I made a pretty big effort to learn Chinese pretty much as quick as I could as soon as I got there. And I would say that's something that I recommend to anybody who comes to China. I know everybody learns Chinese at a different rate. Everybody learns Chinese at a different, everybody's, not everybody has had the ability to process a second language. It's so hard. But at the same time, I think it increases everybody's enjoyment of it. And that's one of the cool, arriving in China and hearing like the Dongbei accent, which prior to coming to Harbin, I was doing some some Chinese lessons on YouTube and things like that. And you just realize, wow, this is, I was listening to Cantonese. And I'm like, what? And then you come to Harbin and it has its own complete unique dialect and accent. And it's like, yeah. And thankfully, it turned out that the Harbin accent is like one of the most standard Chinese accents. So if you're gonna learn like Putonghua, they say like Harbin is like one of the best places to learn Chinese. So I was actually quite lucky to have been able to get a basis of Chinese in that city.
Yeah, right. And going back even further, I do believe you were raised in Phoenix. Is that correct?
My father I was a military kid. So growing up, I spent maybe like the first 10 years of my life going abroad. I mean, living abroad. Like I lived in Japan for several years, for about 5 years. I lived in Japan. And then we settled down when I was around 11 years old in Phoenix.
Right. And when did you start getting into the wrestling? Was it just watching it on TV? Were your mum and dad sort of interested in it as well?
The first time I ever got into wrestling, where I fell in love and I became like a super fan. I was a huge gamer as a kid. For my parent, I would ask for every Christmas I'd ask for the newest game system. I would ask for the newest game, the hottest game of that year, whatever. And one time I went to the store and my parents rented me a copy of a game called WCW World Tour. Yeah, WCW vs NW World Tour for the Nintendo 64. And as a kid, I just kind of took it as a game. It was just a game. These characters like Sting, Hulk Hogan, Rey Mysterio, I thought they just existed in the video game. And then I remember a week later, I'm flipping through the TV channels, and it's WCW Nitro, and I see Hulk Hogan and the NWO, and then I see Sting come down from the rafters. He single-handedly beats up the whole NWO, and I was just in my mind, I'm like, holy crap, this is like a video game. This is exactly like the game, but these are real people, and you just kind of realize it's probably the closest thing to making you realize that wrestling is just kind of like a simulated video game. Yeah. I'm a huge gamer, so when I saw that, I'm like, it's like they're living in a video game. And watching again, and that Sting was the first wrestler I fell in love with. I got really into the Wolfpack and all that stuff, and it just grew and grew and grew. I just became wrestling just became something where no matter where I was in my life, no matter what point I was, my wrestling fandom was something that was probably one of the most consistent things about my life.
And did you started going to the shows as well at that time?
Yeah, at that time I was not familiar with independent wrestling, so just know, at that time it was just WCW, WWF. When WCW came to town, to Phoenix, Arizona, my dad took me to a WCW house show, took me to a Monday Night Nitro, And then I started going to WWF events when WCW folded. But my first like independent wrestling show that I ever went to was in 2005, and that was a very small show at for a wrestling organization called Impact Zone Wrestling in Phoenix. And that just blew my mind. I mean, it was like 50 people attendance, tiny little bar, but like it just, you started to see like the effort of everybody.
Yeah.
Like everybody was working so hard. That one of the things that really like drove me to have like a lot of faith in this being like an industry that could, lead towards a lot of success is the fact that a lot of those wrestlers that I was watching in those independent scenes, they ended up working for the WWE. Like I remember watching like Justin Roberts. He was at an IZW show, and then like 6 months later, he was on TV. Frankie Kazarian. Frankie Kazarian. I can't remember the name of this one particular wrestler, but WWE got him, and they gave him a pretty big role. I can't quite remember his name, but I remember like, oh my gosh, I just saw him like 2 months ago, like in the flesh, like, you know what I mean, like just a few feet away from me, and it's just like, so it started to get me like into like this rabbit hole of independent wrestling, and then that's when I like started getting into like the bigger independent wrestling groups like Ring of Honor, Combat Zone Wrestling, IWA Mid-South. I started getting really into a rabbit hole of indie wrestling.
Any ECW?
Yes, but not the old ECW. We went to an ECW house show that was during the resurrection. It was during the resurrection of WWE's ECW, which unfortunately was not quite like. I think a lot of people have their opinions about it. It was okay, but yeah, I mean, I guess I can officially say I've been to an ECW show in 2006.
Wow, that's really cool. So when did you start getting into the deep end of the wrestling and thinking about, hey, I can do this myself?
Well, I started when I was going to school in San Antonio, Texas. I went to college there, and one of the things that really, when I kind of like went, I guess you could say like too deep into the scene. When I say too deep, that means like I just, I got the bug in me.
Right.
And that's when there's a local federation there called Anarchy Championship Wrestling, and the promoter there, Darren Childs, he was really cool to me. He always like, he'd let me ask him a lot of questions, pick his brain. I would kind of show up early and try to do anything I could. Be like, hey, do you need help with something? At one point I was even helping to set up like a barbed wire, no rope. We took down the ropes and we put barbed wire. We replaced the ropes with barbed wire for a match. So I thought that was like, I'm like, this is amazing. You know? And the brutality of that match, I don't think I could really enjoy it as much anymore. But in 2000, when I was like, 20 years old, I thought that was like amazing. And that's really what like really, got that bug in me. I started realizing and asking a lot of questions and being like, what would it take to run a wrestling show? What would the budget be like? How does the logistics work? How many guys should you fly in? How many should you rely locally? What kind of promotion and marketing can we do? Something that just stuck in my head. And one of the things that when I went to China, that never necessarily left. Like I still had that bug in me.
Right.
It's not something that like, I knew I wouldn't do it like immediately, but like after I got comfortable in China for a few years, but by around like 2014-ish, that's when I'm like, I've been there about almost 5 years then. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I have the resources to give this wrestling thing a try.
And what other promotions were there at the time, or was this like an original thing?
There was the only other wrestling going on at that time was by an individual, a local person from Dongguan, China. His name is The Slam, and The Slam is pretty much China's first pro wrestler. He ended up getting trained to be a pro wrestler in South Korea, and he came back to China and like try to build his own league. he didn't really have the resources to grow it as big as he wanted, but he always has the passion to keep, and always very helpful towards anybody who wants to do wrestling in China. So when somebody had told me, actually I contacted a Hong Kong wrestler named Ho Ho Lun, and Ho Ho Lun, who actually has had a WWE contract in 2016.
Oh yeah, right.
And Ho Ho Lun told me, hey, if you want to do wrestling in China, he goes, you should connect with the Slam. So the Slam is somebody who I'm still friends with today. And he's somebody that I owe a lot to because he was able to provide a lot of resources, a lot of know-how and knowledge into the Chinese wrestling scene. Again, he never quite had the resources that he would have liked, but still, he was the only one at that point, the only other person who had even tried to run a pro wrestling organization in China. So, you asked if we're the first one. I wouldn't say we're the first one. I would say we're the second one in history.
And then 2015, July, was it the first match or the first show that you had?
Yeah, we ran it in collaboration with the Slam and his organization. At that point, we just, we're just getting our feet wet, and we decided to run a show together. So we just split the resources. I said, let's do a 2-day show. Let's do it together, and let's see what happens. And we were able to create a lot of buzz in that first show in China. Like to be honest, it was not the best wrestling show, but for some reason, people were just like enamored. Like, wow, there's a wrestling company in China now. Like people just kept contacting me, media people. Really, even within, and I can't tell you why, but even just a few months after doing that show, like Forbes called. Forbes, they wanted to do an interview with me about that show and what we were doing, and it was just I think we were able to get at that point the interest in Chinese wrestling was very high, because I think WWE was kind of teasing that they were going to do something. So for a while, actually not for a while, I mean even until today, that momentum from that first show was just kind of perfect time. It was just perfect timing. And because WWE was just about to do their first press conference in Shanghai, we kind of beat them to it a bit by a few months. So I didn't even know they were going to do that. And yeah, I think we were kind of able to build off of that momentum, and that's what led to the interest in media, the media publicity that we got.
Yeah. And who came up with the name? Obviously it was yourself, but why the Kingdom of Wrestling?
Middle Kingdom, Zhonghua.
Oh, right. It rolls off the tongue?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And then 2015, what was the plan for that? Was the plan to get more recognized talent or to build the promotion?
Well, the first show we did was it was 2 days. We did 2 days in a row, and we recorded it. And what we wanted to do is to roll out the video week after week of each match. And basically, from the beginning, we really wanted it to be very based, and we really wanted to do something that would be able to utilize our small resources for a long time. So we filmed did 12 matches, and we're able to extend 12 weeks of content by releasing. We kind of wrote the show so that it could be 12 episodes. So we filmed 2 days, and we kind of prepared for 12 episodes. And then there was one way where it could look like we could give the perception that your company is running every week, when in reality it was actually just running, just those original 2 days. And in those 12 weeks, we could plan a lot, get more resources, try to find sponsors, and so that we can do the next set of tapings. Until eventually, we were able to land on a lot of great opportunities opportunities, a lot of great help, and that we're able to bring MKW to like the next level, where we didn't have to do that anymore. We could actually run events like, every 2 months. Like in 2017, 2018, 2019, we were running events like every 2 months with pretty big crowds. And we started utilizing like live cameras, I'm saying like live broadcast feeds on like major networks and things, like on major Chinese video platforms. And, in the beginning, it was just about stretching out the few resources that we had and, utilizing it in a way that can at least give the perception that you're doing something every week or every day. You know what I mean?
One of the interesting things that I saw on your Instagram was that you pay for all the medical bills. Tell us about the reasons why you put all your resources into this. Like, it must be a passion. What's driving you, and why do you do that? Because a lot of businesses don't do that, especially in the wrestling business.
Right. I think the ethics. I mean, I've been in the wrestling business for a long time to not have like rose-colored lenses, where I feel like, what I mean, the realities of what people, in the independent scenes, how much they get paid, sometimes the terms of the deal, which aren't always as fair as they should be. But when it comes to MKW, I feel that the only way we are going to be able to get, first class support. I mean, from fans, from sponsors, from potential investors, is if we at least treat what we do have, which we want it to be bigger, but what we have right now, it needs to be taken care of as well as possible, and it needs to keep a morale within our small group, our small team, as high as possible. Because what kind of fan or what kind of outside partner would want to come in and be able to help us, which we do need help. We always still, we still need more financial support. We still need more resources that, and we're in a position now much better than what we're discussing in 2015. But the thing is that if we can maintain, like, we pay for, accommodation, and we don't ask wrestlers to like, literally pay to work. And we don't, and that we provide, resources like medical help if they need it, if they get hurt because of, working for us. I don't know, I personally, for me, it would be hard, maybe if, I can't speak for others, but it would be really hard to like sleep at night knowing that like somebody had like a really, awful injury, working, and for MKW, and we weren't able to take care as much as we could. So when it came to that post that I did post before about, at MKW we always do this, and that. The reason I mentioned that is because at the time there was a scandal, not in MKW, it was a scandal outside of China, but it kind of caught the wrestling world by storm. And I just couldn't believe what I was reading about what the promoter was asking the wrestlers to do, what he wasn't doing. I just like I just couldn't believe it, and that's why I came out and said what I said, because I think when you realize what kind of promoters there are out there, and believe me, the ones I associate with, and I'll be honest, I've come across very seldom like the scummy, like carny promoter. I would say in my industry, like, at least to people I have in my circle, I would say everybody does their best to take care of others. But I did come out and say that recently, because it was in response to the current wrestling drama going on at that time, which unfortunately did kind of paint a bad light on our industry.
Yeah. So do you have like a training center there where you're developing new talent? And where can people go if they want to try out for MKW?
Sure. Right now, we used to have 2 training centers, one in Harbin and one in Shanghai. And now we've decided to focus just the one in Shanghai. And what we have is a weekly free wrestling club every Saturday at Animal MMA Gym, which is an MMA gym run by Kyle Roski in Shanghai. We partner with his gym to allow weekly wrestling classes, and through that, we've been able to maintain a wrestling presence in Shanghai, where everybody can get together every Sunday to train, hone their skills, do pro wrestling related fitness, and also, just for more people who are curious, if they want to meet with us and kind of get an idea of what the wrestling, what wrestling entails in China. We also are very happy to meet with folks at the wrestling club every Sunday.
That's really cool. I wanted to ask, I know with the entertainment here in China, it can be very restrictive. Like, for an example, if a band from overseas comes here, they have to give all their music to the government. There's lots of action there. There's lots of punching. People could get hurt. So, are there restrictions with doing a promotion in China?
There's always some level of bureaucracy to deal with. But as far as I'm just talking about getting permission to run and licenses and things like that. But as far as more on I guess you could say sanitizing sanitizing a product, or perhaps censoring. We maybe because of nature of what we produce, which that's not to say that we don't. We do have punches, we do have kicks, we do have, some edgy storylines. But at the same time, we've not encountered anything significant where we're one of our episodes couldn't air. How about this? We've never had to take down anything.
Right.
We upload all our shows on every major Chinese streaming network platform, and we've never had to take down anything. So at the moment, we've not come across that. But also, I would say that we try to have a very common sense approach to what is going to be featured on our program.
Right. Business-wise, you've had some major hits like the 2000, everyone with the pandemic, and even 2022 with the lockdown in Shanghai, 3 or 4 months. So, how are you able to sort of survive after all these long periods without any sort of people buying tickets or buying merchandise?
Well, one of the main things that we've been able to do is keep our company relevant through a very, very, very active social media presence. We continue to invest in our social media, whether that's Douyin or WeChat public channel, and we have a large catalog of wrestling content that we release every week. So one of the main things is always trying to keep the company relevant by always being in the social media space and always doing interesting methods to promote wrestling. For example, we recently had this very last year in 2022, during the peak of zero COVID, the zero COVID lockdown and all those kind of things, we started focusing on producing art. So we asked one of our artists to produce, and we asked them to collaborate with an art studio to produce content every week that would combine Chinese characteristics with wrestling. And it's something that kind of kept us in the conversation. And we started actually selling those kind of things. For example, I'm wearing a shirt right now.
Oh, nice.
By one of our artists at Peanut Butter Studio. And what the main idea was the main idea of every art piece was to promote positivity and creativity through Chinese culture and wrestling. And that was one of our ways that we were able, through 2022, we produced about 30 pieces. And another interesting thing that we were able to do actually was have a live stream wrestling. So we'll get a commentator to speak over our wrestling shows every week. So it's kind of like a Twitch thing, you know what I mean? And people can donate money to that, and donate gifts and things like that. So we did a lot of call to action marketing in 2022, and now in 2023, we hope we can have more opportunities to show people, we're not just an art company, we're not just like a media company, but we're also still a wrestling company that produces live sports and entertainment. So that's something that we really look forward to being able to showcase later this summer.
What would you say to someone that's a little bit skeptical about the wrestling? They go, oh, yeah, it's fake. Why should I go and watch something that's fake? What would you say to them?
I would say just come to a live wrestling show. I mean,
exactly.
That's about it. I mean, I think everybody, if you're looking, if you are someone who is very just skeptical, as you said, because it's predetermined, or it's fake, I think if you come to a wrestling show, you can see very quickly some of its more realistic elements of it. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be able to convince you that it's a real sport.
Yes.
But we can definitely convince you that there is a more realism than you might be expecting.
And when you've got the crowd there and the energy, there's nothing better. Nothing better. It's like anything live is great. And when you've got good entertainment, yeah, I don't care what anybody says. It just gives you a good feeling. What's the future for MKW?
Well, the future for MKW is actually going to rely a lot on our next few events. So again, we have this huge show coming up in Shanghai. We're putting a lot of our, but we have like a Swiss Army knife of ideas that we want to debut at that show, at that particular show, and we also have another event planned in Shenzhen at the end of the year. We'll go into detail more after the Shanghai show. But the future of MKW, future of Middle Kingdom Wrestling, is basically we are going to continue on our quest, our journey, trying to make pro wrestling we want MKW to prove that pro wrestling in China can be, both artistically satisfying and commercially viable, because I do think that there's a lot of potential in what wrestling can do in China. And it's not only because of the population. I know everybody always looks at China because of its population, but actually looking besides that part, which we can't ignore, that is very attractive, a very attractive part of China. But actually a lot of what Chinese culture a lot of what the basis of Chinese culture and its martial arts history, and it's also not necessarily just its martial arts history, but a lot of its traditional stories, a lot of its poetry, a lot of it actually can be told through the lens of professional wrestling. I really believe that, and we'll continue to be able to push that so that more people can see beautiful Chinese culture through pro wrestling. And for me, that's the future, where pro wrestling is a vehicle to be able to promote Chinese culture in a soft way that could be a very sustainable and everlasting method for, I don't want to talk into politics, but for a way for China to be able to spread soft power, because I think pro wrestling just lends itself towards soft power.
Yes. And it'd be so awesome to get affiliated with like an independent in the US, or that would be perfect to sort of get that as well. I hope everything goes well. I want to ask, in wrestling, and for you personally, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
When it comes to doing business with somebody, make sure they're nice. Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Social medias, Adrian. Where can we find you, and where can we find your streaming?
If you want to find Middle Kingdom Wrestling on our international social media, please find us on Instagram, which is MKW China, Twitter, MKW Wrestling, Facebook, Middle Kingdom Wrestling, YouTube, Middle Kingdom Wrestling. And if you want to find us outside of China, outside of on the other side of the firewall, you can find us on WeChat at MKW Shuaijiao Wanghua, and on WeChat Shuaijiao Wanghua, or just Baidu us. Google us or Baidu us, both are okay. If you want to follow me personally, I'm on Adrian G4 on Twitter, as well as on Instagram, as well as on Facebook, LinkedIn, however you want to communicate.
Sounds very good. Just a quick thing before we go. I asked a couple of quick questions, and I know you're a big wrestling fan. You give me your top 2 or 3 favorite. All right, just very quickly, and then we'll finish it off. Are you ready, Adrian?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, what promotion was your favorite during the war? Were you WCW or WWF?
WCW.
WCW. Okay. Who were your top 3 favorite? Who were your top 2 or 3 favorite wrestlers of all time?
Sting, Jeff Jarrett, Kurt Angle.
Ooh, good picks. And independents before they were famous. Who were your top 3?
Oh, okay. Zombie Dragon, Peter Avalon.
An up and coming star from MKW, and why?
I would like to promote a few guys from MKW,
Sure.
one Chinese and one foreigner. Okay,
Sure.
So number one, I would say for our Chinese side, I'd like to promote DC Chen. DC Chen, he's a young guy who came to us and he really risked it all. He put his whole life on hold to come and be a professional wrestler, and he was able to prove himself. Working for MKW, training in MKW, eventually fighting in MKW, and winning a championship in MKW. So I really have to say DC Chen is one you should, one who a lot of people should look out for. When it comes to an independent wrestler, I'd like to put over, a foreign MKW wrestler, Zombie Dragon. I think Zombie Dragon is one of the best wrestlers in the world. We've been so grateful and so thankful the fact that he's been working for us for the last 5 years. And I think that Chinese wrestling's been able to flourish so much because of his knowledge and the expertise that he's instilled in China. And I really hope one day he can get a big contract.
Very good. Top 2 or 3 favorite musicians?
Neil Young, Radiohead, and Blackpink.
Very cool. Very, very good mix there. And final question, who is your greatest inspiration / hero and why?
Oh, I would say my greatest inspiration is actually from the gaming scene. He's the president. He passed away, but he was the then president of Nintendo called Satoru Iwata. I liked him because he started off as an engineer, and then he worked his way up to being the CEO of Nintendo. And I really like that he was able to. This is before he passed away. He did pass away as CEO in 2015, but I like that he was able to have some of the biggest successes in Nintendo's career during his period, and also some of the biggest lows. So it means he was trying things every single time. That whole time he was there, Nintendo was went up to the top, went to the bottom, went to the top, because he was always trying new things. So I always look at that as an inspiration, because maybe in a way I kind of look at myself we have been at the top. We've kind of, because of the pandemic, we've kind of fallen a bit. I think we can get back to the top in the future for sure. Or when I say to the top, I more mean back to positive momentum.
Absolutely. Adrian, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to chat with you. Really inspiring that what you're doing here in China and with wrestling in general. Keep doing what you're doing because I know that you're making a lot of people happy. Really happy to promote your MKW anytime in the future. All the best.
Oh, thanks, Craig. Would you? I'd like to invite you. I don't know what your schedule is, but I'd like to invite you to our event on June 6th. I would like to personally invite you. So if you have time that day, maybe we can meet face to face then.
Love to come, and I'd actually like to go and have a look at the training center in Shanghai as well when you come back to China.
Sounds great.
Hi, I'm Tony Fair, founder of Victorian Grooming Company. Is your beard feeling dry or the skin underneath itchy? Maybe you'd rather soften and tame your beard instead. Our classic collection of beard oils, balms, and soaps will leave your beard looking, feeling, and smelling amazing. And if you prefer shaving, our pre-shave oils and shave soaps will give you a smooth and razor burn free shave. Handmade in Edmonton with natural ingredients. Visit victoriangrooming.com.